Hey everybody, it's Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. Today we're talking about anxiety and religious upbringing. Specifically, how worries follow us into adulthood when we have been brought up in religion, even if you've left. For people who've been raised in religion and then left into your adulthood, into really the rest of your life, there still exists a similar need for motivation, for purpose, for understanding what your roles are. So when you are inside of religion, let's take Christianity, for example, the pastor, the head of the church, has a huge amount of say, has a huge amount of importance in the lives of the congregation members. For people who leave religion throughout the rest of their lives, authority figures typically take on a higher importance than they sometimes need to and have a huge amount of sway over the decisions and the opinions and the feeling of self-worth of people who have left religion because they've been so trained to look at authority figures that way. Social circles take on an entirely different meaning for people who've been raised in religious settings. Within the church, your social circle, the people around you, they determine what you are and aren't allowed to do. They are utilized to keep you compliant. The threat of losing your social circle is what makes you stay when you watch the church sort of kick out or shun people who aren't following the rules or people who dare to be different. And until you also make those decisions and lose that social circle and that support, you follow the rules, right? Until you can't anymore. And then you leave and you lose that support. When you have left and you find a new social circle and you find new social support, their opinions and the way that they treat you take on an entirely different importance than they do for people who did not have that background. Most of this is not conscious thought, by the way. I feel like it's important to clarify that. Conscious thought or not, it doesn't mean it's not happening. Similarly, anxious thoughts happen in order to keep us on the path that we expect we're supposed to be on, because those thoughts happen when we are in that religious setting. Again, if we're taking the church, for example, the thoughts that you have in your head, like, am I doing what God wants? Am I being a good disciple? Am I winning enough, souls for Christ? Am I doing the things that God wants me to do? Am I following all of the rules in the way that I'm supposed to follow them in order to be good enough to have what this entity, this church, has told me I deserve to have? Those thoughts and those motivations don't just disappear just because you've left the church. And what I mean by that is your brain has been trained to see the world in a certain way. And just because you don't believe in those things anymore doesn't mean your brain suddenly switches and you don't process things like that anymore. That's not how brains work. When you're raised in a religion that emphasizes rules, you are likely going to do one of two things when you leave. You are either going to become a rule breaker because you've followed the rules for so long that you have no interest in following any rules from here on out, or rules are going to still be extremely important to you, just not the rules of the church that you left. If you followed a religion that was very heavy on guilt, you are likely to do one of two things. Either refuse to allow anyone to make you feel guilty for anything, or live your life motivated by guilt and essentially feel guilty for anything that happens around you, feel responsible for the things that happen around you, and usually try to influence the activities around you, the feelings around you, the thoughts of everybody around you in order to sort of like orchestrate you not having to be responsible for things so you don't have to feel the guilt. If all of those things are true, and I'm here to tell you they are, why wouldn't anxiety be the same way? When you grow up expecting every one of your thoughts to be inspected by this entity that lives in the sky, or wherever you believe that God lives, this creator entity can hear all of your thoughts and judges every one of your thoughts and decides how many of them are like worthy and how many aren't. And you don't get the verdict of that judgment until your life is done, or you get the verdict based on like how good your life is, because that's how some denominations see it, right? If you get blessings in your life, then obviously you're doing the things that God wants you to do. And if you don't get blessings in your life, then God's telling you like you're not doing the right thing, right? Or I don't know, maybe he's testing you. That gets muddy. Anyway, if you don't get feedback on how your thoughts are doing, but you know every thought you have is essentially monitored, that is going to be intimidating. That is going to lead you to worry about your thoughts, right? That's going to lead you to excessive monitoring of your own thoughts, because the expectation that someone else is monitoring them exists all of the time for you. It's not like you get a break from that. So when you start looking at a religion and you have decided it's not for you and you have left that environment, why would a brain that has been trained to excessively analyze its own thoughts just stop doing that? It kind of wouldn't, right? Like you can see that, right? The way that plays out though is in those things that I've said already, authority figures being overly important, social circles having maybe a little too much influence, concern about rules one way or another. And in 3 big questions people tend to ask themselves. Almost every question people worry about in sort of an anxious state can be bundled into one of these 3, right? Do people like me? Am I a good person? And am I doing a good job? Let's talk about where these 3 come from. For people who have come from religious backgrounds, when you've left religion, there is a concern often about your worthiness, about how good of a person you are. Previously, you had a measure of how good of a person you are. And while that measure may have made you feel like crap, it still existed. When you are now outside of that, it can be hard to get a measure and an understanding of your goodness. Are you doing the right things? Are you a good person? Like, what does it mean to be a good person? And those questions can become excessive and distracting in many ways. They can become things that are motivators for so many things that you do, because those are things that, while there may have been so many other questions, those are things you had metrics for when you were within your religion, right? You had like answers for what made you a good person, what didn't. You leave that and there are no longer so many hard and fast rules. And it seems like everyone kind of has a different opinion of what makes someone a good person or doesn't. Are people going to like you if you're not a good person? You feeling like you're a good person and other people thinking you're a good person are 2 different things. Are you doing a good job at the things that are in front of you? Like, are you utilizing the things that are put in front of you to the best of your ability? Here's the thing about these 3 questions. All of them can be traced back to questions that are priorities within religions. Now, I'm not saying these questions come directly from religion. I'm saying that in some ways, religion has tapped into core questions that human beings have and given you a way to answer them, which is why religions are attractive to humans, because it gives you a way to answer those questions. But when you don't have a hard and fast way to answer that, that is going to be anxiety inducing. Another way this exhibits itself, and I think this is really important for people to sort of like clue in on right now, because there are so many examples of this every day in so many of the countries of people watching these videos. And I know because YouTube shows me the metrics of people who watch my videos. I want to talk to you about something called extrinsic religiosity. That's when religious beliefs are used for social reasons rather than personal meaning. When religious beliefs are used to shape social policy instead of to encourage people to, on a personal level, be, good people. The anxiety that this brings up is a completely different level, because when you're dealing with a personal level of expectation, of fear that you're not going to meet that expectation, of pressure you put on yourself to meet expectations that feel like they're, constantly moving and constantly changing and kind of hard to reach. That fear itself is very different from the expectations that are then put on a society level in order to control or maneuver or in some ways manipulate a entire societal structure in order to fulfill a religious belief or doctrine. The idea that everyone should follow the religion that you follow because you follow it, and it's offensive to be around other people who don't follow it, is a completely different level of entitlement that, like, we're not even going to touch in this video. But you can see why people watching this evolution of social policy who have a background in religion, have left religion, but are still dealing with their religious trauma, might be, I don't know, a little higher anxiety recently. Right? We can see that, like we can understand that and make sense of that. Because these questions of, am I a good person? Do people like me? Am I doing a good job? Those questions that are coming up regularly that are used by the post-religion mind to keep you on the path that you're supposed to be on, those questions would be answered by like following the rules of society, but you're looking at the rules of society and going, that's not right. Like what's happening there isn't right. And it's what I left. So like, I know doubly that it isn't right because I left that theory, that policy, that understanding of how people work. And like that is going to cause some cognitive dissonance that's going to be hard to handle and going to ramp up anxiety again. This is a very different video than it would have been if I'd made it a year ago. I'm going to be super honest with you. The ways that people's religious trauma is being brought to the surface right now is different than it would have been even 6 months ago. But that's also why these videos are so important, is people can understand the ways that your religious background can still be informing your ability to exist in the world right now and process the world right now if you have not fully deconstructed what those religions did, how they use their rules, how they use their influence over you, how they use their expectations to keep you in line, and therefore how those things translated after you left and didn't have those expectations on you anymore. Because once you leave that and don't have that over you anymore, your body and your brain create that system for you, like internally. And then you go out into the world and have that system inside of yourself. So what do we do about it? Like most things, the first step is to recognize it. The very first step is just to say, okay, I see that in me and I understand where it comes from. And I understand that being mean to myself over it is the last thing I need to do. Next, I'm a huge proponent of seeing a therapist for religious deconstruction and religious trauma recovery. And I recognize that's not always possible for people. So seeking out psychoeducation videos like this one, or people who do this kind of work and put it out there for people to process is another way to do that. It helps to look at the thoughts that you have that are reoccurring, the thoughts that you have that are causing you stress, or the thoughts that you have when your anxiety is high, and ask yourself where they come from. Do they come from a place that makes sense? Do they come from a place that doesn't really serve you anymore? Like, where do they come from and what's the purpose of them? Once you know what the purpose of them is, and once you know where they come from, it does make it easier to decide either they serve you or they do not serve you and what you can do with them from there. Okay. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you all next time. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other.